سوف تستمع الجمعيه العامه.
The Assembly will hear a statement by His Excellency Faustin Archange Touadera, President of the Central African Republic. May I request protocol to escort His Excellency.
باسم الجمعيه العامه.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I have great pleasure in welcoming His Excellency Faustin Archange Touadera, President of the Central African Republic. I invite him to address the General Assembly. You have the floor, Your Excellency.
Madam President of the 73rd Regular Session of the General Assembly of the United Nations, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, heads of state and government, Secretary General of the Organization of the United Nations, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I would like to extend my warm congratulations to the Republic of Ecuador, and in particular to you, Madam President, for a well-deserved election as the President of the 73rd session of the General Assembly of the United Nations. I can assure you of the full support of my country in fulfilling your mandate. I would also like to pay tribute to the work and remarkable results accomplished by His Excellency Miroslav Lajcak during the past 72nd session, contributing significantly to strengthening cooperation between our countries. I would also like to express my gratitude and reiterate our trust in Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, for his ongoing commitment to peace and development throughout the world, and in particular for his continued and multiform support to my country, the Central African Republic. I would also like to take the opportunity of being here at this rostrum to pay a heartfelt tribute to an eminent African and an eminent global leader, Kofi Annan, who passed away on August 18, 2018. I bow my head in his memory and salute his tireless work at the head of our organization to build a better world. Madam President, the 73rd session is being held under a theme of importance, and I would therefore like to share our contributions to making the UN relevant to all people in global leadership and shared responsibilities for peaceful, equitable, and sustainable societies. In this 21st century, such a goal requires profound reform within our institution, which, in over 70 years of its existence, has made great gains that should be further strengthened, even if challenges and weaknesses remain to be overcome. This present session should boost reflection on how our shared organization should address the new challenges affecting the world and our societies today, namely terrorism, violent extremism, climate change, the phenomenon of migration and poverty. The role of the United Nations, through the joint efforts of its member states under a multilateral action framework, has allowed for major progress in the areas of peace, security, and development in the world. This was true yesterday for the emancipation of peoples with a view to their self-determination. This remains true today in seeking a solution to increasingly complex problems: violent extremism and international terrorism, the eradication of poverty, persistence of conflicts throughout the world, ongoing social and economic inequalities and the growing rift between different states in terms of their level of development or mass violations of human rights. This is the reason for which my country, the Central African Republic, will continue to support the central role of the United Nations in the preservation and maintenance of peace and security throughout the world. Madam President, the global leadership embodied by the United Nations must be bolstered and given the necessary tools in order to effectively respond to the challenges of the hours while ensuring a better distribution of tasks among member states. My country, the Central African Republic, supports the position of the African Union, which wishes to see Africa fully represented in all the organs of the United Nations, and above all in the Security Council, which is the principal decision-making body of our organization on issues related to international peace and security. Indeed, it is high time to correct the historical inequality that continues to deprive Africa of a permanent seat on the Security Council of the United Nations with the right of veto. Likewise, my country joins its voice to the voice of Africa to support an increase in the number of seats of members elected to the Security Council by the General Assembly. This would allow for a more just and balanced participation in this body, which would, in a more representative manner, be able to even better play its role of promoting peace and security in the world. Madam President, the rise in terrorism and violent extremism is a grave threat to international security. It seriously jeopardizes social cohesion in our country. It exposes our populations to blind acts of violence and engenders a succession of humanitarian crises while annihilating development efforts. Faced with this grave reality, Africa has demonstrated and is demonstrating its will to overcome regional fragmentation, to pool resources, and lay the groundwork for a coherent, holistic approach that contributes to the development of a global doctrine to address these asymmetric threats that have now become dominant. Such is the best strategy for preventing and combating these scourges through concrete responses adapted to our environment within the framework of the global peace and security architecture. Ladies and gentlemen, another concern today is the problematic scale that the phenomenon of migration is taking on. When managed well, migration can have a significant positive impact on development in the countries of origins and have major advantages for countries of destination. When managed poorly, migration can have grave consequences for the well-being of countries and migrants with a strong potential to destabilize national and regional security. This is why my country welcomes the holding in Marrakesh, Morocco, this coming December of an intergovernmental conference on the Global Pact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration. And we hope that this forum will lead to constructive proposals. Moving on to another equally important chapter. Our planet continues to suffer the consequences of natural phenomena such as earthquakes, droughts, torrential rainfalls, the rapid expansion of deserts, and global warming. Thus, I would like to take this opportunity to encourage all signatories of the Paris Agreement on climate change to join their efforts in order to preserve our shared environment and ensure sustainable development on our planet. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would also like to take this opportunity that has been provided to me to speak to you about the situation in my country, the Central African Republic. But first and foremost, I would like to respectfully bow my head in memory of all those who have fallen in carrying out their dangerous and noble mission of peace in Central Africa. I would like to express the deep gratitude of the people of Central Africa to the international community in its entirety for all the sacrifices that have been made to return peace to our country. For the past 2.5 years, my government has been working tirelessly to restore the cardinal values that comprise the foundations of democracy, freedom, and human rights. In order to achieve this, we are working to restore state authority through the progressive deployment of the administration and state services in our provinces, as well as restoring basic social services. In contrast, we lament the persistence of tragic and painful occurrences that are being perpetrated by enemies of peace who are driven by interests that are as sinister as they are selfish. It is them who are fueling the violence that, since the beginning of 2018, has been bringing bloodshed to both the capital and the interior of the country, with an increase in cases of violations of human rights and international humanitarian law. Despite all of these challenges, the government has maintained the momentum of its reforms in the defense and security sectors, where significant progress has been made, namely the progressive deployment of domestic Central African defense and security forces, as well as the implementation of the national DDR program. In this regard, I'd like to salute the commitments that has been made by the European Union, as well as our bilateral partners, to support the training and strengthening of our security and defense forces on the one hand, and to support the implementation of the national plan for defense and for the deployment of Central African armed forces with a view to establishing a garrison-based army and administrative presence on the entirety of the country's territory. Likewise, I'd like to express my utmost appreciation to MINUSCA, the United States of America, the People's Republic of China, the Russian Federation, and France for the material support that they have provided to the Central African Armed Forces. Our ambition is to see our armed forces truly operational and contributing alongside MINUSCA to the tremendous effort of stabilization and returning to a lasting peace in the Central African Republic. However, in order to succeed at this, I would like to reiterate from this lofty rostrum our appeal for the total lift of the embargo, arms embargo that continues to constrain our national army. Madam President, the program for the reconstruction of the Central African Republic requires a coherent framework, and we have such a framework in the National Plan for Recovery and Peace Building in the Central African Republic, which is currently being implemented and under which the government and its international partners have already launched 21 projects in the area of basic social services. These tangible advances are the fruit of invaluable, praiseworthy, multiform support from our partners, such as the World Bank, the African Development Bank, the European Union, and the Agence Française de Développement. We have also been making efforts to combat impunity by providing substantial support to rebuilding the judiciary apparatus of the country, which has, inter alia, allowed for the criminal court to hold 2 sessions to judge crimes under ordinary criminal law. In parallel, the Special Penal Court will soon begin its first investigations, while the government has set up the framework for a Truth, Justice, Reparation, and Reconciliation Committee. In this context, and 1 year after its operationalization in September 2017, the Facilitation Panel of the African Initiative of the African Union has concluded 2 rounds of consultations and held a meeting with armed groups in order to collect their demands so as to eventually hold a fully inclusive dialogue. And I'm pleased to recall that the African Initiative is the sole and only frame of reference for any good intentions to support Central Africans as they move forward along the path of dialogue. And in this regard, I'm continuing to assure that all the friends of the Central African Republic, in their generosity, can help us by providing targeted support for the efforts of the facilitation panel of the African Initiative, and the results that that panel has already obtained must be further built upon. My most fervent wish is to allow my fellow countrymen to resolve their differences once and for all in good faith, and to reestablish and strengthen the ancestral links that unite them. Madam President, today the government and the people of Central Africa are resolutely committed to pursuing the course of consolidating the democratic process and the country's economic recovery. In the face of the numerous trials that have marked our history, we know how to be patient but determined in our action, vigilant and aware of the scope of the work that remains to be done. For my part, I can assure you of my firm determination to spare no effort in order to create the necessary conditions for reconciliation and reconstruction of my country, to once again give my people the joy of living together in peace. To our partners, to the international community in its entirety, our gratitude for the constant concern and support provided to us is and remains infinite. To conclude, I would like to express the hope that the international community will remain mobilized at the size of the Central African people and will work in synergy with the government in favor of my country's recovery. I wish us every success in our work, and thank you for your attention.
باسم الجمعيه العامه.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank His Excellency Faustin Archange Touadera, President of the Central African Republic. Please remain seated as we escort His Excellency.